Ladies and gentlemen, the Quake Shake meta is here. This card got a huge buff, and this is now one of the most competitive cards in Marvel Snap. Give the video a like if you're excited, because we've got 5 different Quake decks to be trying out today, including gameplay with all of them. Quake, 2 energy card, 3 power. That much has not changed. What has changed is her ability, and it has changed significantly. She is now reading, on reveal, swap the positions of the other 2 locations. This is a couple of key changes to Quake. Previously, her on reveal ability would only work if you played her at the middle location. That is no longer the case. So she's a lot more flexible. You can play her in all 3 locations and her ability will go off. Of course, you could argue there's also a slight downside to that, which is that if you want to play her and you don't want her ability to go through, that is no longer an option. However, the bigger change actually with Quake isn't the fact that you can play her at any location. No, the bigger change is the subtle wording difference here, which is that you're swapping the positions of the other 2 locations. The keyword being their other. So wherever you play Quake is going to be staying the same. However, those other 2 locations are going to be swapping round. This means you have a lot more agency over what the locations are shuffling to. Previously, when you played Quake, they would all just be jumbled up. All 3 locations would change, and you wouldn't know where each would end up. Whereas now, you are going to know exactly what Quake is swapping to where. This is particularly powerful in a lockdown style deck with Storm, because you could play the Storm on turn 3, and then play your Quake into a different location on turn 4. Your opponent is going to probably commit something like a Ghost Rider or a Dracula or a Jubilee into your Storm lane. Meanwhile, you just Quake, move the flooded location off into a different direction, perhaps where you've played a Nebula or a Sunspot a little bit earlier on. So that's really exciting. So the key combos of Quake, Storm is going to be your number 1. Storm on turn 4, and then committing Quake to a different location, surprising your opponent and winning a different location to what your opponent was expecting with the flooded lane. Legion, I think, is also going to be a common card played with Quake. This is because it still gives you the option of either storming on turn 3 for a turn 4 Quake, or storming on turn 4 for a turn 5 Legion. You just have a lot more flexibility in your game plan. It's also easy to underestimate how powerful Storm on turn 4 into Quake on turn 5 can be when you have Daredevil down on the board. You're going to be seeing exactly where your opponent is committing their cards. So if you don't want to go for that Legion lockdown play, if it's not quite winning you the game at that point, then instead what you could do is you could go for a Quake, because you're going to see exactly where the flooded location is going to go. You know where your opponent's committing your cards. Storm on turn 4 with Daredevil down on the board, definitely an underrated combo, and with Quake it's just become even better. And of course, if you're already playing Daredevil, you know that Professor X is going to be a solid option. I think Daredevil, Professor X, Storm, Quake, and of course then if you're playing the Storm, you're playing the Professor X, Jeff is also going to be a very common card to include. So a lot of these lockdown cards of Quake are going to be the best way to go, in my opinion. I really hope you enjoy Quake as much as I enjoyed her as well. I think she is going to be a serious meta card moving forwards. The first Quake Shake deck is probably the most standard. It's a lockdown deck without high evolutionary. There is also a version of this deck with high evolutionary. Pretty self-explanatory. You're going to be playing your Sunspot, your Nebula nice and early. You've got your Daredevil on turn number 2. Then what you're going to be looking to do is either storming on turn 3 and then quaking it on turn 4, or storming on turn 4 and playing Legion on turn number 5. You've got the Goliath as well as Juggernaut there as both options to win you the location on turn 6. And of course, the movement from Nightcrawler and Jeff also give you those abilities to win locations, as well as the Nebula growing and the Sunspot soaking up lots of energy. All right, this is the first game with the most standard version of Quake Shake. This is a Legion lockdown deck with the Goliath. This one doesn't have high evolutionary. That's the last. The next one we'll be looking at is with higher Evo. Vibranium shows up, great web. We're going to be going for the Storm probably next turn. But there is, of course, the option of going for the Storm on turn number 4 if we have Legion. Currently, there's no sign of Legion. So it does seem to be making more sense to just take the turn 3 Storm here. Let's see. Nova Roma, maybe we see the Legion and then we can consider it. But then again, the Legion play just isn't quite as impressive when we don't have these cards like Sunspot, Nebula down on the board, which we currently don't. So I think I'm still going to stick with the Storm. I'm going to put Storm down into Great Web because I don't like the look of it. And then we can consider doing some Quake shaking as well. If we don't want to commit the Juggernaut off to the left, for example, we go like Maximus and Jeff on turn number 4, and on turn 5 we could do like Quake, and then maybe like a Juggernaut plus something on turn 6, for example. There's a few different things we could consider. As our opponent snaps on us, let's make it interesting and snap back. I'm not actually that confident, but this is a content snap for the people. Try and get an 8 cube madness up in this one. Of course, if we can also find the Eliath going to be a bit of a safer turn 6 play than the Jug. Most likely we're not going to be playing Legion in this game, considering we've already gone for the Storm on turn number 3 here. I just didn't love the look of the hand for... Now, this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting. The Quake Shake, I'm quite liking the look of, right? If we Quake the middle, for example, the flooding's going to come off to the right instead, where we have a Sunspot suddenly. We can even go for the Quake Shake this turn, which makes it slightly even more interesting. So we could go for like a Maximus, for example. Let's just go for the Sunspot, though. The Quake Shake. See how they deal with it, because they do commit something off to the left. And look at this. Suddenly, and the Quake, interestingly, is also triggering the Vibranium Mines. Man thing comes through, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4 cost cards. 1, 2, and 3 cost cards have minus power. Alright, fair enough. We can obviously consider doing a bit of skipping to let the Sunspot grow here. And then Eliath would be the dream top deck you would wager as well. They go off to the left again with Annihilus, which is a lot of points committed off to the left. So I think we can safely give up with the left location. We're not particularly interested in doing much else here, I think. Having said that, I mean, the problem with Maximus is we're giving them too much value. The Nebula also doesn't seem great because they are going to just play down the middle anyway. I'm not sure how the coding is working. Let's for science, because they did redo some of the coding. Let's also go for the Jeff here. And I don't want to go for the Maximus because I'm just giving them access to all the cards they could possibly want. So Professor X was probably winning here as well for us, right, if we found it, which unfortunately we didn't. We're not even bothering with the left. We're too far behind. But I am quite liking the look of just the Jug down the middle here. The Vibranium. Oh, it can't go off to the right, can it? I was thinking it could for a moment. So we do want to make sure we're winning the right still. So the final question is, do we just let the Sunspot grow by a point? Or do we play the Vibranium? And I guess we just let the Sunspot grow by a point. The Jug could actually move stuff in as well, right? So in fact, probably a better bet here is to just go for the Jug and float the 3 points entirely. We're really relying on the Jug pushing stuff to the left here, which I do like the odds. Both cards, it's a Dr. Octopus, which pulls our Legion. So really it's all eyes on where the Octopus and Demon go. We need them both to go to the left, which seems unlikely. Again, this probably was a concede, but I thought we'd play it out for the content. So pretty interesting still nonetheless. If we have a Eliath, this was of course a win. That's the thing to note. They probably should have been running away therefore as they're losing to Eliath, but we didn't find it. Let's get the Nebula down into Wakanda. Can't complain. Also good that they matched us up, because that just gives them one less spot to play into the Nebula lane. Of course, we've got the Storm still. Nightcrawler, I think, is a really underestimated card when you're playing Eliath in particular. Definitely liking the look of the Sunspot. Let's also get the Nightcrawler down. Yeah, let's just get the Nightcrawler down off to the left. I'm going to go with Sunspot down the middle because I don't get much value off Citadel, if any, from myself. So I'd rather just get rid of that. Of course, if we hit the Legion, we could consider the Storm on turn number 4. But we haven't seen it. We are going to take the Snap. Not too threatened by what they've played at all yet. Maybe we could have even considered a slightly earlier Snap. Eliath, of course, reads destroy all unrevealed enemy cards here, which in Dark Dimension is absolutely obscene. But what we're going to want to make sure we focus on is getting the lead overall. So we're going to take the Maximus now. If we have the initiative, our Eliath flips over and just ends the game, right? So we can also float turn 5 for the Sunspot value if we wish. Daredevil's going to show us the way. Jug as an option is interesting. So they're going Iron Man off to the left. I'm going to take the Jug, because if Iron Man moves off to the right, we're still beating it with Goliath, right? And if not, we can... It does go off to the right, perfect. So, who cares about an Iron Man, right, when we're going to just Goliath there? Anyway, I would imagine we might have got them to rage quit off that, but let's go nonetheless. Victory! Daredevil, Jug working in synergy there. Pretty fantastic to see. The High Evolutionary Shake is an incredibly similar deck, except instead of cards like Nightcrawler, we just add in the High Evolutionary package. So we've got the Hulk in there, as well as the Cyclops and the Misty Knight, working in a very similar way to the other deck that we showed with Legion and Goliath. All right, we're up against Thanos, Washington, D.C. We'll take the Daredevil for now, off to the right. We've got the Storm, we've got the Quake. Storm off to Lake Hellas looks good, just because it's a location we probably want to get rid of. Shuri's Lab we can maybe make use of. Possibly a well-timed Quake could do some disruption there and catch them off guard, thinking they're going to be getting double points. Jeff is very good into Shuri's Lab as well, of course.
Wind, aid my hand.
So we could go Jeff and Quake. Yeah. So certainly going to go for the Jeff. Then if we Quake, the one to the right is actually Shuri's Lab. I'm going to take the snap, the risky snap. But it feels like the moment to do it. The Jeff comes through into Shuri. The Quake comes through. It is going to mean that Shuri's Lab comes middle, so whatever they're playing middle is getting buffed. But the flooding is secure. Oh! Sorry, the middle is not getting buffed. I'm talking absolute rubbish. We get to see what they do as well. Jeff is really interesting, right? Because Jeff, they surely play now if they have it. It's Blue Marvel, not a big threat at all, really. The interesting thing here, then, is what happens if we just go Professor X and they have Jeff. Oh, no, but they're now winning mid. So the Professor X is pretty scary for that reason. I guess we're just going for these two then. This is our most points by far. Not the most impressive, let's be honest. Blue Marvel's getting them ahead to the middle. The concern is that they can play Jeff to the right if I move my Jeff, right? If I move my Jeff mid, they can play Jeff right. But they actually just retreat. Happy days. Alright, guys, we're going to snap because we've got a Time Theater double Sunspot game. So we're going to be soaking up all that energy with this High Evolutionary Quake Shake deck. We'll hold on to the Misty Knight for just a moment. Let's hope they don't play Killmonger, because we could be in a spot above her. We're not going to bother with the Daredevil at this point. There's Mobius. Here comes the Soak. No sign of Legion, so we won't play the Storm. Still got the decision on if we go for the Professor X or if we just keep floating the energy, right? Floating the energy's got to be a consideration. And then something like a Goliath on the final turn could be really good. Unfortunately, we don't have the Hulk in hand to be getting juiced up. Iron Lad hits Doctor Doom, which is a massive high roll. I have to say, Iron Lad, probably my least favourite card in Marvel Snap. Just a very high rolly card, not something I'm a fan of. I'm going to float it. No Daredevil down on the board. The Hulk in hand. The Misty Knight on board as well. So this is an 11-point float. It hits Storm this time on the Iron Lad. Not as impressive.
Wind, aid my hand.
Hulk to the left gets us there. We could float as well, of course, again. But I think the Hulk off to the left is the most surprise value and probably the thing they play around the least. In terms of a tiebreaker, we are currently exactly tied. So is 14 points enough to secure the bag on the tiebreaker? I would imagine so. They've also got the Jeff they might move, and they actually end up retreating. Right, so the Soak game plan worked. One deck I'm really excited for with Quake is in a Thanos deck as just a value card. This one has a lot of the same cards with the Daredevil, the Professor X. Of course, you're going to be able to play the Time Stone to get that turn 4 Professor X in this deck. And then you can perhaps do some Storm and Quake shenanigans as well to secure a location. Just overall, the Time Stone's working out really well to iron out your curve. If you don't have Nico, she's absolutely not necessary. You can put any card of your choice in there instead. All right, ladies and gents, it's the first game with the Thanos version of Quake, the Quake Shake Thanos. Got the Nico in hand. After you play your next card, move at one location to the right. We'll just go for the old Mind Stone to start things off. Fisk Tower also just changed in this latest patch. When a card moves here, afflict it with -4 power. I think let's go for a little bit of this. It's a very smooth curve here. Sunspot definitely could go, but of course with Storm and Professor X, it can be such a nice addition. I also did just do a video on all of the data leaks. War Machine could be a nice fit, I think, for these Quake decks as well. So that's something to look out for. So the Necro Shard showing up already is quite interesting too. I think we like the look of that, don't we, really? Turning this into a demon. I think we're gonna snap it, you know. We don't care about Mindscape. We're gonna snap now. And what we're going to do is we're going to play the Storm down in Necro Shard on turn number 4, setting up the Legion on turn 5. Also, Professor X would still be an option, but I'm liking the look of the Storm Legion combo. What I like about these Quake decks is you've just got a lot of different options. Some games you might be going for the Quake Shake, other games you go for the Professor X on 5. This time, as we get the Jeff into our hand... The Mindscape we actually do want to disappear, don't we? Because of the Jeff in hand now. So perhaps we play it like this. It's unlikely they play much into Necro Shard with the negative power. So then we're just setting up for the Legion here on turn number 5. And of course the Jeff can slide into Necro Shard on turn 6 as well. So of course if we wanted to go for like some kind of Quake play as well, we could go for it, but we're not interested at this moment in time. The Legion just does the job. Locking down the Storm on 4, Legion on 5 combo. And that is GG. 2 secured. 2 cubes secured. We got the early snap through. Happy days. Alright, it's game 2 with Thanos. I'm not going to play the Time Stone on 1 because the idea really with Time Stone is try and ramp into the Professor X, if that's a possibility. Let's just take old Daredevil into Miniaturized Lab for now. Klein shows up interesting, gives us some Quake Shake action, potentially. We could Storm off to the left as well. I quite like the look of storming off to the left a little bit. We're going to snap. We're going for the very early lockdown play. Miniaturized Lab we're going to be able to play into the final turn if we feel it necessary. Possibly with a life, we could just secure the bag there if we've got initiative. Lockjaw is pretty spooky, I'm not going to lie. We're probably not going to want to contest the right at all at this point. Probably just want to focus on winning left, really. Now the interesting thing, of course, is we could Quake Shake. And what could end up happening is it could mean that Miniaturized Lab... Let's go for the Quake Shake. I think we're just going to go Mind Stone, Time Stone here, to be fair. Let's see what the Quake Shake does. I think Miniaturized Lab going elsewhere could be pretty interesting. Look at that. Suddenly, we're ahead down the middle. We're ahead to the left, and the only place they can play on the final turn is where they're already winning. So something like Vision, Jeff would still be scary. Of course, we've got our own Jeff as well. There's the Jeff, but we've got the bluff potential to wait for Jeff until turn 6 rather. The big question really is, do they have any other ways of putting points into the middle location? And I must confess, I haven't been playing that much Marvel Snap recently, so I'm not really that familiar with my opponent's deck. Do they have Doctor Doom, for example? That's something I'm unaware of, so I'm going to be playing this one out, but I could be caught out by not being that familiar with my opponent's deck, to be fair, so let's just wait and see. Of course, we're not going to play the Jeff on this turn. I'm a bit confused as to what's going on here. There we go. They're not playing anything. And of course they're going to move the Jeff in at the last possible moment. I suppose there's also no reason for us not to go, for example, for like the Reality Stone here. Try and get the maximum amount of points on the tiebreaker as well. And the Reality Stone could end up doing something like the negative zone, not the negative zone, bar with no name, like the inverse. So Reality Stone is a bit of a Hail Mary. Could also turn it into no card can enter or something like that, right? Which could mess up their Lockjaw, for example, or the first card that's played here is destroyed. So Jeff moves into the middle. Do they have any way of getting points down the middle? I don't want to see something like a Miss Marvel. It's not a card that I own, actually, myself. But Lockjaw, all eyes on him. The Reality Stone comes through. Come on, be kind. Thanos would be a massive 20 points. And it's Limbo, a whole extra turn. Could end up costing us the extra cubes. But perhaps it could also save us too if they hit something like Doom. It's Psylocke. And it's a She-Hulk. And unfortunately, the Reality Stone has cost us a couple of cubes because surely my opponent now runs away. The Quake Shake, though, absolutely popped off with the Klein and the Flooded. Unfortunately, we don't quite get those 4 cubes, but a fun game nonetheless. The Reality Stone costs us 2 on this day. Cerebro is a great fit for Quake as well because you can play either Bast or Ravona. This version of the deck has both, and you either play the Bast or you play the Ravona, probably not both, but this just gives you a lot of options. You can Bast up your Professor X to get him being buffed back up by the Cerebros. Also, Bast hitting Storm means that your Storm is going to be getting that Cerebro value, and the Ravona then also just gives us a lot of interesting cost reduction plays. The Professor X can come in at turn 4, which is really interesting, and you can even Mystique on turn 5 to copy your Professor X and then try to put some points in there later on with something like Jeff. You've still got the Quake in there as well with the Storm play doing the same sort of stuff. Quake into Invisible Woman also just gives you that license of swapping the locations on the final turn, but you can commit it preemptively. You could play the Quake on turn 5 and then shuffle the locations on turn number 6. All right, first game with the Cerebro deck. I'm actually against a friend of mine, Bastardside, someone that I had the pleasure of meeting in real life recently, where a Cerebro deck and Mer Island shows up, so definitely not the most positive of starts. However, we do have the Cerebro into Invisible Woman, which is pretty exciting. Mer Island, definitely a concern, though. Professor X onto Mer Island isn't going to quite grow. Oh no, Professor X in Mer Island will grow in time to the number that we want, won't it? It's going to grow twice, so that's something to consider. It doesn't really look like something we're too interested in, though, truth be told. No sign of Jeff just yet either. So this version has a Professor X. It also has a Leech to play. Not sure how good Leech is in the current meta, but I think it's definitely a card worth considering in a Cerebro deck. I think a lot of people forget just how good it can be. The Jeff is definitely scary that they've got as well. So the big question really is, do we actually want to take the Pro X? Probably not, is the honest answer. However, we're going to go for it. We're not going to go for it because then Jeff just moves in, doesn't it? There's just no way it's ever good. So let's take the Leech. Oh my god, it's a Leech mirror? What? It's crazy. I don't really like that for us. We can play 2 cards which get buffed a lot. We'll play it out for content. Let's load the right up. And say they don't play anything mid. That is exactly what they go for. It's a Miss Marvel and a Black Widow. Both removed. And here comes the spice. It's the Cerebro. It's the Mystique. It's a victory. Unlucky my friend Bastardside. GG. Bit of an awkward first game. You see Mer Island, it's usually going to be a pain for us, but we managed to find a way just about. Alright, our opponent snapped us straight away. We're going to snap them back. This game looking like a bit of a Ravona game. We can try and get the Quake Shake going on. This Cerebro 3 deck you can really build any way you want. Whatever way you like playing Cerebro 3 is going to be the way to go. I'm trying a bit of a hybrid between Ravona and Bast in this one, but I'm also definitely keen to experiment with some other versions as well. So it looks like Ravona is the play here. Interestingly though, the Bast would also buff up my Storm where we want her to be. So let's go Ravona off to the right. I think we're going to have to accept that we lose the Raft. Perhaps we could try to Storm the Raft. Iron Man on turn number 4 also is looking quite tempting as well. Down into the middle. Let's Storm off to the left. So Storm comes through off to the left. Of course, that Soul Stone knocking her down to 1 power means she isn't going to be getting buffed by the Cerebro if we find it. They're now full to the left as well, which is... They can move 1 card in, though. It's Iron Man down into Aunt May's, getting that +3. So they move the Psylocke in. They do fight pretty hard for the flooding lane. And here comes the Iron Man. Where is it going to go? We're happy with either side, I think. It goes off to the left. So this is now where Quake is a really interesting proposition. Because the flooding lane is going to move to... We can just move it to the right if we want, for example, right? That we would rather do this. Yep, we're going to go with this. Nico and Reality Stone, that's fine. What is it though? Dream Dimension's not a problem. Irrelevant at this point. And this is where Quake is just so fascinating when you've got the flooding lane. The fact that you can choose where the locations are going to be swapping exactly means that the Storm play is so much better. We are winning the right, even without the Cerebro buffs. They're Cosmoed down the middle as well. Professor X not really the card that we were looking for, if we're honest. We do not have enough because of this Soul Stone to win the left. So instead we're going to have to fight to win the right, which is pretty heartbreaking. Fight to win the middle, which is pretty ridiculous. But that is the way the cookie crumbles. We could, I mean, we need to do this. And the Bast is actually slightly better. I think we might have it still. They end up running, as you would imagine that they would. Bit of a bluff from us, because they're just going to assume that I'm winning the left here, right? But we actually didn't have it because this Soul Stone was having such an impact on the game. But we made the decision to just pump all our stats mid. The Cerebro is going to be buffing up the Cosmo, the Quake, the Invisible Woman. The Bast is sneaking in. So we had 16 points down the middle. So they needed 13 points here to win. And of course, they were thinking that my Iron Man to the left is just going to be taking it. Okay, and a home I think Quake is going to really have a lot of success in is in a Silver Surfer deck. You can do a couple of interesting things in this one. For example, if you really want to, you can get the double Quake action going through on this one because you can Quake on turn 5 and then on turn 6 you could play Absorbing Man to copy it. Moreover though, we're going to be using Sarah on turn 5, which means that we can dump our hand a bunch on turn 6. For example, we could play Jeff, Quake, Brood, and Silver Surfer all in one turn. We've got the Rogue, Cosmo, and Juggernaut for that little bit of control. Of course, you can go for Rogue, Jug, and then copying the Absorbing Man. You can get a whole bunch of movement and space denial. I think overall, Silver Surfer makes a lot of sense with Quake because you're able to get those Silver Surfer points buffing up your Storm and then just doing the Storm shuffle with Quake. The Quake Shake is just a really good idea overall. Okay, the Silver Shaker. I do love a bit of Goose action, I have to say. So let's get the Goose down first and foremost. We've got the Brood into Absorbing Man combo if we want. So in this deck, Absorbing Man can be a double Silver Surfer after the Sarah. It could also be a second Quake in some situations if that's something we're interested in. I definitely don't hate the idea of... I guess I do kind of hate the idea of Cosmo. Let's just take the Brood off to the left. I'm wondering then if we can go Absorbing Man into Sinister London and then just slam the Silver Surfer down the line. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. We take the Absorbing Man for the second Brood. Fills up our board pretty massively. You have to say that the Sinister London probably going to favour more a low-key player than us. Rogue can also hit Miss Marvel here. Unfortunately, we can't play Rogue down the middle. Oh, now we can. Hello. The problem is that our rogue doesn't actually give us the value, right? We're going to skip and hopefully find the surfer and go for the pop-off play. And even if we don't, we can bluff it. I mean, maybe they got our silver surfer in hand with cable. There's better chance that they have our silver surfer than we have our silver surfer. Storm is still interesting though, because storming the Sinister London does also stop the Sinister London value. So it's surely worth continuing here. We'll also just go... I mean, interestingly, instead of storming it, we could Quake. Then we could Cosmo. I actually like that. I actually really like that. I'm not going to snap it. Let's play it out. So we Quake to move the Sinister London away so they don't get the Sinister London value. And then we Cosmo in case it's something like a Doom. So Quake again doing the business. It's a Devil Dino, but we get the job because they were looking for that Sinister London value. And Quake does not let them have it. So Quake is like a mini Legion in a Silver Surfer deck. Insane. Kind of insane. Alright, we've got Invisible Woman off the Daily Bugle. Not the worst card. I think we might actually just hold on to it for now. I'm going to snap because we've got the Jeff plus Brood into White Hot Room. And then we can follow it up with an Absorbing Man as well for just big stats all across the board. They have an Invisible Woman off to the left, so obviously we're going to be a little bit concerned about Hela. We do play Cosmo as well. We could also Goose this in a little bit, but let's of course start off with the Broodlings. Getting that 3 extra energy per turn. We can go for an incredibly premature Sarah. Turn 4 Sarah. If we so desire. But we could also just go for the Absorbing Man for some more Broodlings. That's a bit of a weird play, mate. That must be our rogue off of the Daily Bugle. 7 energy. 7. I would quite like to Sarah, but to be honest, the Absorbing Man seems like the way to go when we have no guarantee that we're actually finding the... I'm going to go Absorbing Man off to the right. Goose to the left. This means I can still Cosmo the Invisible Woman. Hulk. Blade. Lots of source so far. Of course, they can go for the Hela outside of the Invisible Woman lane. Let's not forget. We know they can't go Invisible Woman. They can't go to the left anymore. I quite like the look of Rogue because I get the Surfer source, and this is being hidden, right? So the question is, do I need to play last card here? I'm going to be at 9 energy next turn, so even if I top deck a 3-drop, I can still play everything, right? Not including the Sarah. So the Hela could be the card on top, 1 in 4 that it is. But we also do find the Cosmo. We then have so there's a 1 in 4 that they missed, that they drew Hela. So the other question is, where do we Cosmo? Like mid or right? Go here. They missed it.